Barnesy is an icon. If you're not familiar with that name, it stands for Jimmy Barnes, and in Australia he's a national treasure. A rock and roll singer who's lived a hard life. He's been a hard man. But because of the experiences that he's had, it gives a certain tenderness and pathos to his voice. In recent years, in a series of biographies, he started to disclose something of his life story. And what has become paramount in the telling of his story is his childhood experience of both domestic violence and sexual abuse. Barnesy reflects on this experience a lot and talks about, in many ways, and this is my term, how one of the ways that he responded to this childhood trauma was to insulate himself, not to trust anyone. And as a consequence, he became dead on the inside. But as a mature person, he reached a crisis point, and there was a particular phase in his life where he reflected on his life with complete clarity and transparency. And as a consequence, he cried out literally, "I can't do this by myself. I can't do this alone." So the combination of honest self-reflection and the recognition that he needed others led to a dramatic transformation in his life. I want to take some of those key elements from the story of Barnesy, that rock icon, and explore them in a theological context. To do that, the three elements that I particularly want to highlight is the importance of reflection or self-reflection, of relationships, but also the revolution, the dream of transformation with social and political consequences. In order to do that, I want to begin by referring to a text in the Gospel of Luke. It's chapter 10, verses 1 to 9. It's a familiar text, but Jesus gathers his followers, sends them out two by two, travelling as they conduct the mission of Jesus into the world. Now, of course, the term mission, or the idea of mission, has in many quarters been ruined. We think of Jehovah's Witnesses coming knocking on the door and being intrusive, or in a more sinister version, we think of the 19th century post-colonial or the colonial missionaries of the 19th century. But I want to reframe that. The mission of Jesus, the mission that Jesus is sending people out for, is about this ministry of self-reflection, honest appraisal of ourselves, about the importance of relationships, and about having some kind of vision or mission or project which we engage in for the betterment of others. And to give that some kind of feel, to ground that, I want to pick up another biblical text. And I'm picking up a text from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 9, with that famous refrain, "Is there no balm in Gilead?" Now, the reason I'm picking up this text from Jeremiah is that Jesus himself, when he envisages his ministry, sees him very much in the prophetic tradition. Prophets like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and 2nd Isaiah figure prominently in the thinking and the discourse of Jesus. In this particular text from Jeremiah, we see Jeremiah, who's sometimes known as the weeping prophet, grieving over what has happened to the province of Judah. They've had their opportunity. They've been anxious, under threat. They've compromised themselves. They've made all sorts of relationships with other nations. They've turned their back on God. And now through the prophet Jeremiah, he grieves. In a sense, he expresses something of the tears of God for what has happened to God's people. Now, historically, we know that in 587, before the Common Era, Jerusalem was destroyed, and a number of them were taken into exile into roughly what we would know as Iraq. There were others who were already taken there to exile, but this event in 587 was pivotal. So Jeremiah's lament is not an idle or sentimental thing. It comes from the deep. It represents on his part the agonizing, honest self-reflection about what has taken place for the people of God. Critically, in his reflection, the image or the model of God that emerges is a God who feels for us and with us. There is an element of judgment, but it is not the God of judgment. It is in a sense the judgment that we bring upon ourselves. But the overall sentiment, the overall feel of God is the God who grieves with us because we have ended in disaster. Jesus himself takes up these many elements. I mean, there's a classic text at the end of the Gospel of Luke where Jesus weeps over Jerusalem and expresses the clarity of insight like the prophets, but also echoes that the lament of Jeremiah, the lament of God, the holy and incomprehensible one. So we come back now to the ministry and mission of Jesus. When we talk about the mission of Jesus, we're not talking about something intrusive, about Bible bashing, about forcing our views on somebody. It begins with our own humanity. It begins with honest self-reflection. If there's one important aspect of the ethos and piety of Christianity is honest self-reflection. This is who I am. This is my life. And out of that clear and honest self-reflection, like Jimmy Barnes, there comes a cry from the heart that says, I can't do this by myself. I need others. I need to be part of a community of friends. I need to be engaged with others for the sake of others. I need something to live for. And all these elements are key elements in the ministry of Jesus. Jesus came teaching and preaching about the reign of God. The reign of God is about the potential power and creative presence of God in the world, which is transformative. And it's a gift. It's serendipitous. It comes to us in unexpected ways. But it requires a certain openness, a certain clarity. And usually, for most of us, it takes a disaster or two before we start to see ourselves with new eyes. So the three key elements then in the mission of Jesus is this honest self-reflection, not self-berating, but transparency about our own situation, which at the same time gives us a nudge, and it makes us realise we need others. We need to be engaged with others. We need to care for others. And together, as a community of friends, we enter into the world working for justice, acting with compassion, trying to build peace and to transform communities for the common good. On that note, let's return back to that rock icon, Jimmy Barnes. If you're not familiar with him, Google him on YouTube. He knows how to sing with an element of lament. And I think that's why he's so daring. He's possibly, and I probably shouldn't say this, past his prime when it comes to singing, although he can still belt out a good tune. But when he sings, and especially when he picks up something of the blues, there is an element of lament there. And when I say lament, it's a really constructive thing. It helps us, in a sense, identify our own grief, to put our finger on it, and in it to express it. And at the same time we express it, there's often a remarkable clarity about our lives. Not a sense of self-punishment, but about, this is me. I've ended up in this mess. I've made some decisions that have meant that I've ended up here, but this is my predicament and I don't like it. And I'm now going to make some decisions that are going to move me into the future in a new direction and in a new way. And in that new direction, I need the companionship of friends, a community of faith, a people who share these values and this vision. So out of a place of darkness, with this new clarity, we move into the world, into the light, looking for like minds. I don't necessarily mean people who agree with us on everything, but who share these deep and lasting values about the Spirit, about the human spirit, about the Spirit of God, which yearns for our transformation, that longs to help us deal with the disasters which we face. The Spirit of God who wants to build a community of friends who venture into the world. We live in really difficult times with, the United States elections soon upon us, dealing with the pandemic, all sorts of anxieties and concerns around us. But in spite of all of that, and perhaps because of that, there's a kind of global disaster forced upon us. And whilst at times we're entitled to feel miserable, and there are days for feeling miserable, sooner or later we become exhausted by it. And in that sense of exhaustion, we often have a clarity about ourselves and our lives. This is the mess in which I find myself, and I don't like it. And I'm starting to make some decisions about the life I feel called to live. And I'm choosing to reach out to others, not only in order that I might be cared for, but also that I might care for others. And in this mutual experience of care, this mutual regard for others, we build new communities of faith and courage. And together, not by ourselves, but together, we can discern the holy, gracious, courageous, and daring vision or vocation that is in store for us. We can make a difference, but it often begins from a place of honesty. I can't do this on my own. In the spirit of Jeremiah, and with something of the ethos and the lament of Jesus, that kind of clarity is often a turning point. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen.